This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe.
Sister, Herbert for boya. I don't know, sir, for wrong gone. Then she also for boya na to my 16 red gone no. So I die. So wrong picking. So wrong picking. Oh, gone outside, gone. And if you comment that she should gone. The worst one I said they can say what did they? I say bad. It bad.
Sounds from the streets of Boya. Another week, more carnage, ceaseless bloodletting across Ambazonia. More targeted killings, enforced disappearances, more reports of rape and maiming, and only one piece of good news. Ambazonian leaders abducted in Nigeria in early January 2018 were finally allowed to meet with their lawyers and members of their families. Here is Ambazonia Calling's Innocentia with the wrap-up of the news of the week.
95% of Ambazonians want total and complete independence. Those words, that percentage, brought rapturous applause to the testimony by Efi Tembong at the hearing of the U.S. Congress African Subcommittee on Cameroon on Wednesday, June 27th. Lost in the sea of Ambazonians that flooded the halls of the U.S. Congress was the Cameroon ambassador to the United States. In Ambazonia, very reliable sources are reporting growing tensions between traditional authority and the military junta of La République du Cameroun. Sources say the fawn of Bafut rushed out of his palace barefooted and performed a traditional ceremony that has not been seen in recent memory. In the meantime, locals in several communities across Ambazonia are uncovering mass graves, reportedly the handiwork of La République du Cameroun genocidal forces. Unconfirmed reports also confirm mounting pressure by families of soldiers for La République du Cameroun to release the names of their fallen loved ones. The main highway linking the northern and southern zones of Ambazonia via Manfe has been blocked in Batibo. Intelligence sources maintain that while it is part of the strategy to defend villages from pillaging by La République du Cameroun genocidal forces, and as part of a plan to make the land ungovernable, the barricade is also in conjunction with a purported kidnapping of a colonial divisional officer, the second in several months assigned to the region. Muyuka was rattling bullets late Wednesday night into Thursday, sources say. At least 2 civilians are reported dead from the fierce fighting that lasted several hours with Amba restoration forces holding ground. The flag of Ambazonia was symbolically raised in Bafut last Monday. This was following violent clashes that forced occupation forces into retreat. In Kumbo, charging chariots of Ferrobia are running into the Red Sea even on highways. A speeding truck carrying La République du Cameroun paramilitary officers killed a motorcycle rider and his passenger. 3 occupying forces died on the spot. Another died on the way to hospital, and several others are dealing with very serious injuries. The family of Samuel Chiaba, aka Sam Sawyer, has taken another bullet for Ambazonia. Terence Chiaba, aka Rally Ipupa, the younger brother of Sam Sawyer, was fatally shot in Belo. In what some read as pay-to-play, 4 businesses owned by Ambazonians have raised the bulk of 200+ million CFA francs pledged so far by top donors of the 13 billion CFA francs humanitarian assistance that Ambazonians continue rejecting. Leading the pack is the infamous Alaji Dampulo of Ndawara Farms with 50 million CFA francs pledged, or $100,000. Finally, the bankrupt government of La République du Cameroon has auctioned off Cameroon Development Corporation (CDC) to French and Egyptian investors. Observers say the move may underscore bleak prognostics on the current crisis by the colonizer. Hence, they are liquidating even what is not theirs, including the £1.5 billion deal that sealed earlier with London-based energy company New Age Limited. Innocent Chia for Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner for the Ntumfoyn of the Week. And we are not done until we have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling. An envoy of France's President Emmanuel Macron, who is visiting neighboring Republic of Cameroon, crossed Friday into Ambazonia's southern zone. The envoy, France's Minister of State to the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs, Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, was shown in photographs being welcomed to Buea, Ambazonia's capital, by citizens of the Republic of Cameroon bearing a banner with words of hospitality entirely written in French, or should I say enemy language. Pundits say he is the bearer of an offer of an amputated federalism system that must be dead on arrival, one that would create 4 states, with 2 named the Sawa and the Grafi states. The one will lump the northern zone of Ambazonia to the west region, and the other will lump the southern zone to the littoral region. Again, dead on arrival. Almost 1,000 colonial troops have set up a makeshift barracks on the hilltop luxury estate of Ndawara in Boyo State, ahead of what is predicted to be an assault on Amba fighter positions across Com Kingdom. Ahead of the attack, the colonialists issued arrest warrants for 26 mostly or exclusively Com sons, accusing them of terrorism and confessing that the only proof they have in order to levy such a charge against them is the mere fact that their names were found on an exercise book that was picked up in the forest. Quite some proof. Fellow Ambazonians, please be extra careful with any exercise books in which you have entered the names of, let's say, members of your Njangi group. Former CTV and CRTV editor-in-chief and news anchor Eric Chinje penned an open letter to the leader of colonial Cameroon, slapping Mr. Biya in the face for the colonizers believe that he can shut down the Ambazonian uprising through military might. Chinje's recommendations include a call for Mr. Biya to release everyone from jail, to withdraw the colonial forces from Ambazonia, and to approve via referendum a constitution that upholds the inviolability of the 2-state federation. And such an approval can only be deemed acceptable if a majority vote passes in favor of it in the 2 states. Sadly, of course, Mr. Chinje's offer for a return to the 1961 federation is way past and redundant. His suggestion that a day of prayer and an annual day of national mourning be instituted are considerations that Ambazonians no longer have and do not want a foreign country to put in place for them. One line in the letter sickened me to my stomach. The line in which Mr. Chinje says the violence ongoing now in Ambazonia is perpetrated by extremists, a word that Mr. Biya has used and has pissed up Ambazonians very seriously with. And that's a news wrap-up.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Church leaders have a history of activism. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. led the civil rights movement in the United States. Archbishop Desmond Tutu fought apartheid South Africa. Pope St. John Paul II was a key actor in the Polish uprising and freedom. Bishops, courageous bishops of South Sudan, led the breakaway from Khartoum. And Pope Francis laid the foundation for the repair in relationships between the United States and Cuba. Here is Ambazonia Calling's Lambert Mbom on what the church can do in the Cameroons.
When too many might have still considered a return to a two-state federation an option, the Catholic Church in Ambazonia delivered what will forever be referred to as the encyclopedia of the crisis. Sadly, a seeming disconcerting resignation to fate amidst a disenchanting feeling of powerlessness by the Church to broker a deal between the colonizer and restorationists has gripped the leaders of the Church. Their fear may be justified, among others, by how notorious the Biya regime is in its unquenchable thirst for blood. Religious leaders have paid with their lives, the latest of them being Bishop Benoit Bala of Bafia, and a long list of priests and religious murdered in cold blood. The strongly worded memorandum of the bishops of Boya, Bamenda, Kumbu, Kumba, and Mamfe, delivered in December 2016 to Paul Biya, failed to convert Biya, the son of a catechist, a former altar servant, a former junior seminarian, and a Catholic who has invited and hosted two of the last three popes. Like clergy from other denominations, Ambazonian Catholic bishops are between the rock and the hard place. They felt the wrath of Ambazonians when they kept Catholic schools open despite calls for a schools boycott. On the other hand, they were sued by the government of La République for closing down some schools. A frivolous lawsuit later dropped and remembered more for its failure to intimidate or impress anyone targeted. Bishops of La République, including a large number from a certain tribe, failed to do for their Ambazonian colleagues as they would love to be done for them. Francophone bishops have remained silent in the face of the bastardization of Ambazonians. This scandal is beautifully captured in a letter addressed by Paul Samangasu, a Francophone Christian, in April 2017 to Francophone bishops ahead of last year's Episcopal Conference meeting. Archbishop Cleda, president of the conference, has repeatedly paid lip service to the Ambazonian conundrum. A few things may be possible. How about creating the Ambazonia Episcopal Conference and boycotting the Yaoundé-based so-called National Episcopal Conference? Shall we hear of the Ambazonia Presbyterian Church and, of course, the Ambazonia Baptist Convention? Without holding up the light, churches in Ambazonia would be aiding and abetting the work of the demon. Perceived as doing so in Rwanda during the genocide had grave consequences on the Catholic Church there. Ambazonian church leaders need to do what their calling dictates. Lead fearlessly, for only the truth sets free. Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
It is my pleasure to welcome on the phone Professor Tata Menta, our guest, for our Devil on Mask, the Truth Out segment. So, Professor Tata Menta, what do you think about this humanitarian program that the Biya regime is proposing to Ambazonia?
I think it's a shameful insult to Ambazonia's humanitarian values. It is in connivance with the wish of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who is going around canvassing for finances for humanitarian relief. This is a wrong definition of our problem.
So he's trying to make this into a humanitarian crisis.
And consequently, he is trying to look at it as an internal problem for the terrorist Republic of Cameroon, instead of seeing it as an interstate problem.
I mean, for a long time, the United Nations played exactly these games from 1946 when they were first told that apartheid was a huge problem. They thought they could get the apartheid regime to deal with racial harmony within South Africa and deal with it as an issue without the world participating.
That is why when you look at the so-called United Nations, you actually understand that it is an institution which has been ruined completely by its administrators. Because in our own case specifically, it says we should go back to the roots of the problem. This root of the problem is the abortive decolonization of the state of Southern Cameroon. There is no other thing like harmonizing whatever kind of relationship with La République du Cameroun. Because first of all, La République du Cameroon has only a flag and anthem independence. It is not a sovereign. When you look at the cooperation agreement signed with France on the 26th of December 1959, you actually understand that this is an outfit of the French colonial system. So there couldn't be anything like unification with La République du Cameroon because it is a colony of France up till today. After they talk of relief, humanitarian relief, the next thing they'll be going to is talking of reconciliation. I do not see how one could be talking sanely about reconciliation with who? How do you reconcile Satan and Christ? The two can never be comfortable bedfellows. Never.
And but at the same time as we are dumping down on the United Nations and their failure to assume their role as a diplomatic outfit, we saw some remarkable progress before the United States Congress this week when there was a hearing on the Cameroons. What is your take?
It was a very wonderful and instructive meeting, and I think the hearing is supposed to go a long way to convince the crime industrial complex of France, the Republic of Cameroon, and the United Nations of Antonio Guterres that they have to make it before they are overtaken by events. Otherwise, very soon they will find that the United Nations will become, even though we know that it's already obsolete, it will be discovered that it doesn't have any solution to any critical problem on earth.
We have pushed the diplomatic offensive with the strong belief that the role that the United States has played as a midwife to nations that have been built recently, whether it's Timor-Leste, South Sudan, that this is a role they need to assume with respect to Ambazonia. Are you encouraged?
Very, very encouraged. The United States, as the most powerful country on earth, needs to take its place and home it to these scoundrels that the United States of America cannot sit down and watch them destroy humanity.
We also saw this week, and it was a piece of good news, that the leaders who were abducted in Nigeria and were renditioned to Cameroon, that they are alive, that they are seeing their lawyers, they are seeing their families. But we know that when a regime as brutal, as savage as this one has been holding you for 6 months, we have to have serious concerns.
Definitely for me, I do not think that La République du Cameroon has any right to try any of our leaders whatsoever. No right. They are not citizens of La République du Cameroon.
Also, there would be serious consideration as to the state of mind of these people before anybody's taking them into a court.
That they should be taken to a psychiatrist where, especially in the United States or in Canada or in Australia or any of those civilized countries we can imagine, where they will certify that after the trauma these fellows have been subjected to, they are capable of standing trial in any court on earth. We do not see how, having been abducted since January up till today and living incommunicado for how many months, you expect them still to be psychologically prepared for any such prosecutions.
Last question here, Prof. We saw that there are also economic crimes, and there was one half of Ambazonia that was being sold off to some foreign firms this week.
That is where restorative justice has to come in here. And all these fellows have to be prosecuted not only for crimes against humanity, but also for economic crimes, attempting to liquidate or liquidating the patrimony of the Southern Cameroonians or Ambazonians. They have absolutely no right to be bargaining away the economic fortunes of Southern Cameroonians. It is not their territory, the resources are not theirs, and they don't have any right to that. That is why restorative justice has to come in here and handy.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you, my pleasure.
This week, We saw pictures purportedly showing the mortal remains of the former superintendent of police for Fundong. The body was mutilated, with one picture suggesting that the police officer's manhood had been chopped off, likely a sign that he suffered horrible torture at the hands of his captors. This killing, along with few video clips posted on WhatsApp purportedly showing hostages undergoing torture, are a reminder of what should not be done. Chrissa Cunningham offers advice on what Ambazonian fighters should do and what they should never do in order to avoid persecution when, not if, a tribunal on the Cameroons is set up in the future.
Campaigners for the restoration of the independence of Ambazonia have made a wise choice from the very onset of this revolution: to pursue only legal, diplomatic, and nonviolent approaches to achieve their goal. Crowds of Ambazonians, waving tree branches in a sign of peace, bear witness to that commitment. Unfortunately, the colonial regime declared war against so-called secessionists and now treats every Ambazonian as a terrorist. A growing number of mostly young people have responded by evoking their inalienable right to self-defense. However, in order to avoid committing any war crimes, atrocity crimes, or crimes against humanity, pro-independence fighters should follow strict guidelines. Here are 5 they should prioritize. First, they should not attack colonial forces unless they are attacked, provoked into attacking, or are forced to defend themselves. Should this happen, they should always write a report documenting the incident and provide that to their commanders or human rights organizations. Second, they should never launch revenge killings or retributive killings targeting anyone. This is the hallmark of the colonial forces. Pro-independence forces acting in self-defense should therefore never copy the savagery of the colonial forces. Instead, Ambazonians should multiply those incidents where they are seen on WhatsApp video, caring for the most vulnerable, providing food, shelter, and protection. Third, liberation forces must never target civilians or an unidentified part of a civilian population, as such acts would qualify as crimes against humanity, and these are ungodly actions. That's why the call by some for French speakers to be targeted is wrong and should never be heeded. Fourth, the commanders of pro-independence forces must remember that they constitute a de facto authority, just as within an army. They should avoid being charged with war crimes by never tolerating, encouraging, abetting, or ordering massacres, dehumanizing treatment, or extrajudicial punishment, including summary executions. They should never act like a death squad, should not inflict unjust imprisonment, make use of child soldiers, or commit rape. You must not stoop to the level of your persecutors. Fifth, do not take hostages or abduct anyone unless your survival depends upon it, or if you would be killed if you failed to take the person hostage. However, should you be forced to take anyone hostage or prisoner, you must never harm them, must never torture them, and must do everything possible to release them as soon as it is safe for you to do so. Again, document any such incidents and report them to superiors and human rights organizations. Otherwise, you run the risk of the colonizer committing crimes and hanging them around your neck. We at Ambazonia Calling believe that a tribunal will be set up to prosecute all those guilty of atrocity crimes, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in Ambazonia, and anyone involved in this revolution should always bear that in mind. Chrissa Cunningham, Ambazonia Calling.
The Ambazonia Recognition Collaborative Council, ARC, is organizing a town hall event next Saturday, July 7th in Washington, D.C. The event will be hosted by the Catholic University of America. The address is 620 Michigan Avenue Northeast. It will be holding in the Heritage Building from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you live in or are visiting or are flying into the D.C. metro area, come and hear what ARC has been doing on recognition. Come and provide your input. Come and hear about the plan going forward and how everyone in the diaspora can become ground zero for the final diplomatic offensive to win recognition for Ambazonia. Anyone can and should join this effort. Every now and again, an Ambazonian pops up on television or on radio in colonial Cameroon to say some truly outrageous things denouncing the restoration quest. The surprise is all the bigger when the guilty party is considered one of the godfathers of Ambazonia, an illegal luminary, as Barrister Manjong Jude Ambe now reports.
While pioneers like Molanjol Litumbe and Fongoji Dinker stand in a class of their own and entitled more than anyone else to eat the gizzard or break the kola nut at any meeting discussing Ambazonia, there is a triplet of sons of Ambazonia who will forever be remembered for striking the first match that's the source of today's fire. Dr. Simon Munzu, Barrister Ella de Contan, and Professor Carlson Anyangwe are the trio who led the organization of the All Anglophone Conferences AAC 1 and 2. At both the first and second gatherings in Boya and Bamenda respectively, the three sang from the same hymn book. As legal luminaries, the three cited any number of United Nations resolutions that had been violated, including Article 76B on independence being the inalienable right of all colonized peoples. As a unit, the three adopted a declaration from AAC 2 in Bamenda, which warned the colonial government of La République of the zero option, the Declaration of Independence, should Yaoundé fail to act. Everyone knows all these things, so why am I boring you with it, some may ask? Well, let me learn. A few days ago, millions of Ambazonians were shocked again, and not for the first time, to hear one of the trio, Dr. Simon Munzu, speak from both sides of his mouth. Dr. Munzu's claim that UN Resolution 1514 of December 14, 1960 is not a legal instrument Ambazonia can use got many questioning when the learned gentleman found out that this was the case. Did he just find out? Or was the resolution always there when he joined his two brothers to put out the Bamenda Declaration with the zero option? If indeed, as Dr. Munzu argues, Ambazonia cannot benefit from Resolution 1514, can he show Ambazonians which resolution predated and made it possible for countries like Eritrea, Timor-Leste, and South Sudan to gain international sovereignty? Might it be that Dr. Munzu realizes that the politics of siding with the colonizer is better for his checkbook than any advocacy he could be doing for Ambazonia? Or is this another Fonchamuna moment when Ambazonia pays the price for the political ambitions of some son of the soil too keen on rising as an individual even if they drown Ambazonia in the process? Which version of Dr. Munzu are Ambazonians dealing with or listening to today? Is it the version that issued a celebratory voice message after ghost towns brought Ambazonia to a complete shutdown in obedience to calls by the consortium trio of Barrister Agbonkon, Mr. Wilfred Tassang, and Dr. Ntumfoyn? Maybe it is the version in search of the next UN high-level appointment, the one who needs to be nominated and approved by the colonizer in order to assume a high-profile position under the small UN staff quarter for colonial Cameroon. Come on now, Dr. Munzu, what's happening to you? Is it your contention that Ambazonians the world over are so dumb and or delusional and you happen to be the only sane person to be their savior? Have you chopped soya? Or is it the case like our people will ask, Sipi them fufu don't dry for your hand? It is about time Ambazonians hit Shakespeare's warning. The near in blood, the nearer bloody. Manjong Jude Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
If you are looking to invest in something truly exciting, look no further. You can now become a partner of Africa Freedom Network, which is getting set to launch the first ever radio television network serving Africa, Africans, and friends of Africa around the globe and on the continent, with reporters based in 34 African countries and a news gathering capacity second to none, now lined up and ready to go. Africa Freedom Network is about to show exactly how news of Africa should be covered, how a story should be told. It is the next big thing in African journalism, and definitely the next big thing in investment in the news media. Get invited by sending an email to info@africafreedomnetwork.com. If you want to attend the first ever General Assembly of Partners and Shareholders, which holds next Sunday, July 8. So many people have joined the contest to win the crown of Nyamfuka of the Week. Alas, there is still only one crown, and there can only be one winner. And as usual, two runners-up. Atanganji Paul was doing his thing again this week. Although he already knows, or should know, that we will never consider him as a nominee for Nyamfuka of the Week because he is an eternal Nyamfuka. Atanga Nji is still trying so hard to get on the list of nominees. This week he used every piece of intelligence in the first school living certificate education that he has got to seek notice. Congratulations, Mr. Ex-convict and future convict Atanga Nji. Your claim that Ambazonian leaders are being detained for their own protection is a piece of plagiarism from Konchu Komeni of Zero More fame. Didn't you know we would notice? Sure, you tried, but you came way short of distinction. You get honorable mention. Adoti Akwe of Amnesty International was a serious contender for the crown this week. Sitting side by the U.S. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs during the hearing on the Cameroons by the U.S. Congress on Wednesday, and despite hearing the U.S. government official provide figures to the effect that 151 people were killed in Ambazonia during the month of May 2018 alone, Amnesty International managed to downplay the fatalities, reporting to the U.S. Congress that colonial forces shot dead 20 Ambazonians, 20, and yet regurgitating figures steeped in propaganda and provided by the colonizer that their troops had lost 81 men, soldiers, police, and gendarme officers. Amnesty International seems decided on misrepresenting Ambazonia. Although that is a grave crime for a so-called human rights organization, Amnesty International fell short of winning the crown this week. Hans de Marie Hengop of the International Crisis Group was also before the Congress of the United States. He was listed as an expert witness, speaking on behalf of an international organization for which he works. Sadly, though, his testimony demonstrated what happens when you fail to acknowledge conflict of interest. As a native of the Republic of Cameroon, and as an avowed supporter of the so-called one and indivisible Cameroon, Hengop found himself speaking more for the colonial regime than as an expert witness. One statement in his testimony stood out more than any other. The International Crisis Group, he said, does not support separation in Cameroon. What? Let me read that again. The International Crisis Group does not support separation in Cameroon. Sorry, Mr. Hengop. Neither you nor the colonial regime whose views you defend, nor the International Crisis Group can impose a one and indivisible Cameroon on Ambazonians, not even if you were to constitute yourselves as the new and improved Berlin Conference, where the boundaries of a colonized Africa were drawn. The International Crisis Group should refrain from ever telling a sovereign people like the people of Ambazonia what choice they should make. But for doing that this week, the Yam Head, the International Crisis Group, is the winner of this week's dishonorable award, the Nyamfuka of the Week.
This week, Ambazonia Calling is brought to you by themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
As you know, the U.S. Congress held a hearing this week on the Cameroons, during which Effie Tembong truly did Ambazonia proud. Ambazonia Calling will produce a special edition focused solely on the hearing in the upcoming days. For the time being, here is the oral statement of Effie Tembong before the U.S. Congress.
We desire to urge the United States to condition its military support to the Biya government on immediate redeployment of its troops to northern Cameroon to aid in fighting Boko Haram. And we urge for an international commission of inquiry to fully investigate the crimes against humanity and bring perpetrators to justice. And let the United States call for an international mediation to resolve the crisis going on in southern Cameroon to prevent further atrocities and genocide. And for these negotiations to be effective, we believe the following conditions must be met. All those arrested in connection with the crisis must first be released. Talks should take place in a neutral venue. The mediator must be acceptable to both sides, and negotiations must include addressing the root causes of the crisis and self-determination for the people of former British Southern Cameroons. Those are my recommendations. There are horrific crimes going on, committed every single day by soldiers, government soldiers, against civilian population in the regions, in the Anglophone regions in southern Cameroon. And I believe these crimes amount to war crimes or crimes against humanity. Soldiers go into villages, burn down villages, even burn people, all elderly people in their homes who cannot escape. And it's heartbreaking to see what's going on. We work in communities across this region. We have staff on the ground, and every single day I get stories. I see pictures of homes burned, of people killed. And it really breaks my heart to see what's going on. When oil was found in southern Cameroon, so former southern Cameroons, the state of West Cameroon was dissolved. And for southern Cameroonians, it was recolonization or annexation. So the teacher strike, that is really just, I would say, a storm in a teacup. That's not an issue. In 1984, when Paul Biya decided to go back to their name, La République du Cameroun, it was tantamount to to secession, because it's ironic today that they call those who are fighting in southern Cameroon secessionists, when Paul Biya himself seceded in 1984, when he went back to the name the country had at independence. When the teachers and the lawyers summed up their grievances in a request to restore the state of southern Cameroons, the administration of Paul Biya responded the way it responds very often, with repression and killing, and arresting the leaders who had demanded a return to the federation, because there were other groups asking for independence. And today, more than 90% of the people, or say 95% of the people, are fighting for independence. Their commitment to freedom is unbreakable, it's unbendable, what I've seen on the ground. They were being killed, and even in the bushes, and they realized if they didn't defend themselves, they'll be killed like chickens. And so they started to look for arms. There were groups that were, some joined groups, some formed small groups, defense groups in their communities, and got hunting guns to fight back. And when they ambush a soldier and kill a soldier, government troops come into the area because they know the local population supports these groups. They burn down villages. I've seen people who have been burned, people burned in their homes, shot, their mass graves, and this is going on every single day. If this is not genocide, I don't know how we would describe genocide. It's genocide going on in Cameroon. And when the international community failed Rwanda, and we are about to fail the people of former Southern Cameroons, I think we need to rise and see what's going on and hold the Biya government to accountability, and listen to the cry of the people of Southern Cameroons for freedom, for an independent Southern Cameroons. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Global media has finally taken an interest in the genocidal violence unfolding in Ambazonia and are beginning to report substantively on it. But as Innocent Chia notes in the following report, before it gets better, what is out there is plenty of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The good word says, to whom much is given, much is expected. The reason why Ambazonians were somewhat expectant of some coverage by major news outlets as the restoration fight attained early crescendo points in September and October of 2017. The splatter of blood was still shocking to the ordinary Ambazonian who believed that such was the fate of a people in another distant land. So they cried their eyes out. They wrote memorandum after memorandum to whomever, wherever, not excluding CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, BBC. They wrote to the big news anchors and the beloved hosts, including Rachel Maddow. Eventually, the conflict is making the banners on CNN, BBC, New York Times and Washington Post have even jumped in, albeit with narratives that are far from accurate, lopsidedly against the victim and closer to the fiction narrated by the colonial La République du Cameroon. Disappointingly, the BBC, New York Times, and Washington Post stories have largely depended unapologetically and without any copyrights on WhatsApp video footage shot at risk of life by ordinary Ambazonians. But the journalistic malpractice is that the BBC, New York Times, and Washington Post have gone exclusively to government sources for rebuttal of the videos that they were using. Not once have these traditional news outlets gone to those they call separatists to debunk government positions and narratives regarding the ongoing conflict. For instance, the Minister of Communication is given an opportunity to lie to the world that the uniformed forces ostensibly caught on video setting fire to homes are not their special forces, jointly trained on U.S. taxpayer dime and Israeli expertise. Truth be told, wearing military fatigues in Cameroon is prohibited by law and is a punishable offense at all times. The term for it in Cameroon is gombo, a local delicacy that is known to be very slippery. When a journalist or news outlet receives gombo, their reporting becomes biased. Many media houses mask it behind advertorials, and news organizations use this means to make money by writing positive stories on entities, including governments. The shame is that I cannot reconcile between this BBC and the one whose dial I could not change on my grandfather's transistor radio. In spite of the failure by the big guns, Al Jazeera TV, Russian television RT, have steadfastly shown balance and fairness. Independent journalist Matthew Russell Lee of Inner City Press in New York has been a one-man army journalist who has kept coals burning on the feet of the United Nations. His tweets and live sessions from UN hallways have endeared him among Ambazonians. Last but not least, the mission's Tribune has all but made the restoration of the independence of Ambazonia a mission for them. In two of its last monthly publications, the mission's Tribune has headlined the story of Ambazonia. In its latest June edition, it highlights the visit by the Ambazonia Restoration and Collaboration Council, ARC, to the U.S. congressional and senatorial staffers. As a matter of fact, it was the Mission Tribune that broke the news that the African Subcommittee will be having a hearing on Cameroon shortly. Innocent Chia, for Ambazonia Calling.
When southern Cameroons broke away from Nigeria in 1953, the people leading the way out of Enugu back to Boya were the people's representatives and the government of the then southern Cameroons. That was when the people's representatives listened to the people. As Willibrod Ade reports, the people's representatives are now representing themselves.
Since the beginning of the lawyer strike that eventually evolved into the quest for the recognition of Ambazonia, one cannot help but notice the very loud silence of the people's representatives, also known as parliamentarians and senators. Apart from the fiery speech by Honorable Joseph Wilber in November 2016 and the attempts by the SDF parliamentarians to disrupt the parliamentary sessions in order to force a discussion on the so-called Anglophone problem, there has not been a single lawmaker from the two regions who has addressed the issue in any meaningful way. Talk less of condemning the state-sponsored terrorism that has seen the burning down of whole villages and, even worse, the burning alive of some villagers in their homes. While none of these lawmakers will ever be nominated for any kind of Profiles in Courage award, except for the aforementioned Honorable Wilber, one would have expected that by now, 7 months into Paul Biya's ill-advised declaration of war, and seeing the carnage, pain and suffering that has been visited upon their people, they would have had a come-to-Jesus moment and spoken out on behalf of their constituents as is required of them. Instead, in a remarkable display of callousness multiplied by dereliction of duty, these men and women have put themselves in the unenviable position of both public enemies of the Ambazonian people and enemies in the house of the Cameroonese. If we interpret the deafening silence as a tacit support to the Ambazonian struggle, it means they are telling the world that the putative representatives of the people are not allowed to speak up, in which case they will be looked upon as the enemies in the house by the Cameroonese. On the other hand, they will go down in history as the representatives who betrayed the people's trust by looking the other way while their constituents were being massacred, their properties pillaged, and their villages razed to the ground. In that case, they will be looked upon and treated like the collabos in France who helped the German invaders during the Second World War. Willie brought a day for Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
All 5 African teams to this year's FIFA World Cup in Russia have been eliminated during the group stage of the competition. Unlike Zaire in the 1970s, no African team was ridiculous, was a shame, but none either was spectacular. So despite the Senegalese coach claiming all too early that his team would leave the trophy, the Lions of the Teranga, as they are called, return home without a trophy. But one thing that Senegal won at this year's World Cup, in my opinion, is the award for the most hilarious football commentator. You have to hear this to believe. Please listen to Senegal's commentator in the following excerpt.
Fait un long passe, récupération de Kisonda, qui donne à Nagatamoto Yutu qui donne à Motokarina Sungundu, qui donne à Khin Khan pour Khan pour Khan, Nagatamoto Yutu, qui donne à Danu Khin, Shaolin Kin pour Salif Sane pour Ganagay pour Kalidou Koulibaly. Attention Nagatamoto Yutu, attention à Nagatamoto Yutu, qui donne à Motokarina Su, Shaolin Ningi pour Khin Khan, qui donne à Khin pour Khan, Mogana Yutu, qui récupère le ballon pour Kisonda pour Karina pour Tissi, pour Moussine, récupération de Salissane, Kalidou Fadiga, attention, Kassafran, Kalidou Koulibaly, pour Karim Ndiaye qui fait l'engagement, attention à Nagatamoto Yutu, qui récupère le ballon sur le pied de Kisonda pour Karina Kusili pour Moussine Khin, qui donne à Khan pour Khin, Darunin Khin, attention Moto Karina, Nagatamoto Yutu, qui récupère le ballon. Sadio Mané qui fait une longue passe pour Ganagay récupération de Salif Sane pour Kalidou Koulibaly, qui récupère le ballon. Kalidou Koulibaly, longue passe de Papa Ndiaye qui fait un engagement de Beignan. Attention, Nagatamoto Yutu qui récupère le ballon. Nagatamoto Yutu. Il fait 11h, après on reprend l'antenne pour la deuxième partie de l'équipe sénégalaise qui est en train de faire un match excellent. Les Japonais sont en train de se défendre, mais le Sénégal est en bonne position. Il faut faire très attention à Nagatamoto Yutu qui souvent les ballons récupérés par Motokarina qui donne à Khin Khan pour Khan. Chaque instant, il y a une complicité entre Khin et Khan. C'est des complices de ballon. Khin qui donne toujours à Khin pour Shaolin Ning. Oui, tout à l'heure.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, I hear that your grandson, the slave master in France, sent one of his sons to find out exactly how badly you have been managing the overseas province of France, that is the Republic of Cameroon, and the slave plantation that Paris would like to maintain Ambazonia as and annex. That is not good for you, Joshua. Let me tell you what everyone else is just murmuring. Your grandson and slave master says if this continues, if the English-speaking slaves on the west of the Mongo continue to refuse to pick cotton for the master, if they keep the palm oil plantations, the cocoa, the coffee, and the rubber plantations shut down, if the rebellion continues, the writing is on the wall, Joshua. You are going down, Joshua. You know the French better than any Ambazonian, so you must know that you are today exactly where Laurent Gbagbo was in Côte d'Ivoire just before he took to hiding in the bunker beneath the presidential palace in Abidjan. And that was shortly before he was arrested like a common criminal and whisked away. The French know when they are done with sucking all the juice out of an orange. The French know how to dump the chaff, Joshua. You can ask Hissène Habré and Ange Félix Patassé. They both came through Yaoundé after they were driven out like dogs from the presidential palaces in Bangui and N'Djamena. When you are the foreman of the slave plantation and you see the slave master send in his minister to Europe and foreign affairs to visit the former plantation, you have to know that the hour has come, or the hour is coming very soon, Joshua. I'm just saying. What are friends for, Joshua? If I would not leak this intelligence to you, who would? I mean, thank me? Not at all, Joshua. You are welcome. It is what we have to do, a warning a friend has to give his friends. I mean, with friends like the French, who needs an enemy? Things can only get worse when your guest has to be airlifted out of town. By the way, did you notice that the ex-Prime Minister Peter Mafani Musonge and those who work at your bilingualism shop completely failed to recruit Ambazonians into the folklore of welcoming the French envoy to Buea? The banner with words of hospitality to your guests were all in French, in the heart of English-speaking Buea. That is how you pay lip service to bilingualism. Why fix up the plantation on inspection day? It would be like fattening your chicken on the market day. At least, the inspection will be able to report back to Paris how woefully you have failed in nearly 50 years of reign and 35 years of absolute misrule. To even translate a banner. I mean, your grandson Macron, whose country is not bilingual and who has no obligation to speak English, holds his own in English, whereas you have failed him in even implementing what you brag to have achieved, national unity and national integration. That is what happens to the foreman of a slave plantation, who instead of attending to the slaves, goes off to live at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva. From time to time you come back to the plantation to visit. That is how you have spent 5 years over the last 35 at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva. 5 years, Joshua, living in a hotel in another man's land, enjoying the fruits of another man's hard labor, because you are too lazy, too incompetent, too wicked to do for the Cameroons what someone like President Paul Kagame has done for Rwanda, building from the ashes of genocide. Kagame has the blueprint for what Ambazonia will become in a few short years after we send your colonial forces packing and our international sovereignty is fully restored. If you can scale the wall we will build on our border with your country, and La République will pay for that wall. If you can scale the wall and obtain a visitor's visa, you can always say you are coming to learn English, for example, or you can straight up apply for political asylum. We will show you around and be civilized enough not to violate the principles of non-refoulement. Talk less of organizing your rendition to France, where sure as hell, you will be wanted for crimes you think you can hide. We don't want to have anything to do with you, Joshua. Our people have a saying for this. If the sheep does not want to get any sleep, it should lie down together with the lion. No, Joshua, thank you. From our studios here in Washington, D.C., our producer is Jeff McCoy. Our music today is from Ken Wanaku, the monk from Balikumato, William Ford, an Ambassador of Blessed Memory. Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org. And Prince Ajua Alemanji of Ajam Sonic Kitron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at www.themissionstribune.com, www.compassfreepress.com, and www.africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another day. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.